I'm gonna show you how great I am.
Good taste is for people who can't afford sapphires.
Who wants to be king?
The ego. It's a part of our identity that is responsible for being the gatekeeper between what is conscious and what is unconscious, what is real and what is unreal. Majority of the time, it always hovers back and forth over what seems and what actually is. That is why, more often than not, we always find our egos not getting along or getting contradicted by our own conscience, leading up to a seemingly endless mental clash between what feels right and what is right. But when we do get along, it is one of the best feelings anyone can experience. Ego is further elevated through a sense of affirmation and actualization, both internally and or externally, like outside compliments and inner recognitions, leading to a surge of an escalated sense of self-worth. Ego is further destroyed or numbed down through a sense of refutation and prejudice, like outside criticisms or condemnations and inner derogatory monologues, leading to a plunge of a deprecated sense of self-worth. Now, to answer the question of whether ego is our enemy, we first have to answer whether we actually need to have an ego in the first place. And the answer is, absolutely you do. Our egos are the more conscious part of our identity, and more often than not, right or wrong, legitimate or illegitimate, rational or irrational, we rely on their judgments to significantly assist us in our sense of conviction towards many of life's unpredictable circumstances. To make a crucial choice, you need to have an ego. To have confidence, you need to have an ego. To have self-belief, you need to have an ego. To take risks, you need to have an ego. To stand up for yourself, or something, or someone, you need to have an ego. You cannot assert or present yourself in such a way that would profoundly convince yourself and others without having an ego. You just simply cannot not to have an ego. The worst thing you can do for yourself is to constantly shun your ego and become overly and unnecessarily humble to the point where you start to discredit yourself and your own body of work, all because you are too afraid of criticisms and confrontations. This is exactly the point where you'll easily get swayed, convinced, and manipulated by others because you have no sense of individuality to defend yourselves with. And I know what the argument is going to be. Isn't it utterly delusional for us to still rely on our egos when they are being wrong and irrational in their judgments? Yes, absolutely it is. Unless you are able to realize its mistakes much earlier and make the much needed corrections. But that's just the beauty in making mistakes as human beings, isn't it? So that you can realize them and make the necessary changes and adjustments for the future. So that your ego can eventually see eye to eye with reality and your conscience with regards to certain circumstances you're working on. The most significant, memorable, and impactful lessons you'll ever learn will be instilled through making major mistakes, not through voluntary investigation or analysis. Because making mistakes will cost you more and make you lose a lot more. That is why you'll become more determined and incentivized to change. The only time when ego will become an enemy to you is when you allow it to completely isolate you or got you completely invested away from compromising yourselves towards the further development of your overall character. Usually in the form of a self-deceptive perception towards the visceral reality of your circumstances and the inability and reluctance to look from other available perspectives. But what about arrogance? Arrogance comes with having a big ego. Isn't arrogance a bad thing? Isn't it damaging for both the individual and to others? Even if you are a great person of great influence? To be completely honest, I have absolutely no problem with arrogance, so long as the arrogance comes from a place of utter authenticity and integrity. An individual's self-proclamation of credibility and greatness should be adheringly consistent with the amount of constitutional merit he has earned, or at least his legitimate attempts, progress, loyalty, and persistence in attaining that merit. That is when you are truly deserving or are acceptable to be arrogant. Because what is there that is left to argue about? If your profoundly bold statements about yourself beautifully matches both your actions and body of work, the only criticisms or condemnations that is left from others will only come from anything but your performance, i.e. personal insecurities, grudges, etc. To know whether your ego is an ally or an enemy depends on whether your reliance of it has tremendously transformed you and your circumstances for the better, and that is the question one can only answer for oneself. Thank you for watching.